Kings and emperors historically led armies into battle, but as you'll know, heads of state haven't exactly done that for a while. LBJ wasn't fighting in Vietnam and Queen Elizabeth wasn't engaged in the Falklands. But when and why did this change occur? When did kings, emperors and presidents stop leading their troops into battle? Now, there are numerous reasons why kings and emperors would so often lead armies in the classical and medieval periods. There was an expectance that a ruler would also be a great general and that a king would want to win great victories for themselves. However, the main reason was simple. For the overwhelming majority of rulers, power at this point was derived from their armies, and so giving said means to power to someone else, many of whom would have been men of rank or even close relatives to the ruler, was not a smart idea. Now, even when these kings and emperors led their soldiers into battle, they weren't often at the fore. They would mostly stand on a hill with a good view and give orders. This wasn't a risk-free strategy though, and whilst rare, kings did get captured and killed. So when did things change and why? Well, a common idea is that kings stopped leading troops after the invention of firearms, since standing on a hill behind the action wasn't so safe. But really, that wasn't the reason, since the effective range of a musket was pretty short, and so leaders were still safe. Although when firearms did become more accurate, it certainly prevented monarchs from coming back. In fact, the decline in kings leading armies occurred in the 18th century, and by the mid-19th century the practice was pretty much dead. For example, the last British monarch to lead troops into battle was George II in 1743 at the Battle of Dettingen. In fact, from this point onwards, most rulers, barring Napoleon I, did very little actual leading and were essentially mascots. And obviously there are exceptions to all of this, such as in 1934 when the King of Saudi Arabia led troops into battle against Yemen. So what were the reasons for this to end? Well, a lot of it was due to the professionalisation of militaries that came about after the 30 Years' War. This centuries-long process saw the creation of a full-time officers' corps who were ideally promoted based upon merit. And frankly, kings, presidents and emperors weren't the best at leading armies, unless they had been military leaders before becoming heads of state. Furthermore, the role of these leaders and the political landscapes they worked in were much more stable. George III giving the Duke of Wellington a large army wasn't a threat to his power, because succession laws were pretty solid by this point. I mean, it's not like these troops would have declared him king after his victory at Waterloo, as tended to happen in, say, the Roman Empire. And the same applied to other rulers. James Madison wasn't under threat of any military coup when Washington was sacked, since the founding values of the US government were well respected. As the centuries progressed, wars became much greater in scale. Gone were the days of a single ruler leading one army across a country. Instead, it was done by a general staff who had spent their lives as soldiers and could understand the complexities of war in a way that a professional rubber stamp could not. And also, culture no longer required for a king or ruler to be a great military leader. Instead, they just needed to be competent in navigating internal politics. And it's these reasons, the professionalisation of the military, the expansion of war scale and complexity, the security of modern constitutions, and cultural change which said that a ruler no longer needed to be a warrior, which saw a king's role on the battlefield come to an end. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and a special thanks to my patrons: James Bisonette, The Pastry Section, Danny Maloney, Marvin Cassow, Kelly Moneymaker, Rob Waterhouse, John Bizquez, Mo, James Castaneda, Aaron the Whites, Jordan Longley, Marcus Arsner, Gustav Swan, Jerry Lambdin, John Bailey, Calling Castleman, Rashid Ali, Spinning Three Plates, Fielder Oink Oink, Maggie Patskowski, David Silverman, Izzy, Lexi Schwinn, Robert Wetzel, Sky Chappelle, Spencer Lightfoot and Winston Kaywood. Lizzie would have been great at it though.